Russian sleep experiment. In the late 1940s, during the height of the Soviet Union, a group of 5 political prisoners were chosen to participate in a top-secret experiment conducted by the Soviet government. These prisoners were promised freedom in exchange for their cooperation. The experiment was intended to study the effects of prolonged sleep deprivation on the human mind and body. The prisoners were placed in a sealed chamber and provided with adequate food, water, and other necessities. The researchers' aim was to observe how their bodies and minds would react to being kept awake for an extended period. However, things quickly took a dark and sinister turn. As the days passed without sleep, the prisoners began to show severe signs of sleep deprivation. They became increasingly paranoid and exhibited psychotic behavior. Hallucinations and violent outbursts were reported among the subjects. Despite the deteriorating mental states of the prisoners, the experimenters continued to monitor and record their actions. The researchers were particularly interested in how sleep deprivation would affect the subjects' loyalty to the communist regime. After several days of sleeplessness, the situation escalated into a gruesome nightmare. The prisoners started to mutilate themselves, believing that by doing so, they could stay awake. They began to scream and beg the researchers to let them out of the chamber, but the experimenters remained steadfast in their observation. Eventually, one of the subjects could no longer endure the agony and stress, and he fell into a catatonic state. Another prisoner followed suit, and they succumbed to the effects of sleep deprivation. By this point, the researchers were aware that they had gone too far, and the experiment had become a nightmare. However, they continued to monitor the remaining subjects. When only 3 subjects remained, the prisoners formed a desperate pact to stay awake to avoid facing an unknown punishment. The situation took an even darker turn when they started to turn on one another, tearing each other apart in a violent frenzy. The researchers finally decided to terminate the experiment, as they feared what would happen if they allowed the last 2 subjects to continue. They unlocked the chamber and discovered a horrifying scene of death and destruction. The 2 remaining prisoners were severely injured and barely alive. As the story goes, when the chamber door was opened, one of the surviving prisoners looked at the researchers and uttered these haunting words, "We no longer want to be freed." The legend concludes by claiming that the experiment was covered up by the Soviet government, and all records were destroyed. However, a fictional account of the event was allegedly leaked, leading to the dissemination of the story across the internet. Again, it's essential to emphasize that the USSR sleep experiment is entirely fictional and should be regarded as a work of creative horror storytelling rather than a historical event. Thanks for watching.